You're listening to the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. Now here's your hosts, Kevin, Derek, and Alex.
All righty, welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Good Old Boys Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Derek, and joined, as always, by your co-host, Kevin. How we doing tonight?
Doing good there. Doing better. Got the bright lights out of my eyes. Holy smokes. Doing all right, man. Friday night, get to kick it here with you, heading into week 11. I guess I'm going to start the show off like this. What a bummer of a Thursday night game, right?
Yes.
But I really hope the Bengals get it handed to them about not reporting this pre-existing injury, right? Like, there were so many things that have come out after the fact that leads us to absolutely believe the Bengals knew, right? The Bengals knew that he was dinged up. It wasn't just a compression sleeve. It was more for his wrist than just a compression sleeve. And the fact that he had it coming off the bus but didn't have it when he was walking into the stadium is kind of weird. The fact that they didn't report it is a problem. There's too much money tied up. The NFL is too invested in gambling and fantasy football, both, to let this slide. So I just hope that there's a real resolution, because they were looking into the Bijan thing a couple weeks ago when he had an upset tummy and Arthur Smith decided not to play him for 99% of that game. And then we never heard anything about it. But I really hope the Bengals get it handed to them, because that is a problem. And there were millions of dollars that shifted hands one way or the other because they knew that and did not report it. Like, that is a problem. So it's almost, I don't know. Like, I liken it to insider trading, only in the reverse, right? Like, you're not sharing information to give someone the gain. You're holding it back to hurt someone. And it's not a competitive edge thing. Like, that's horseshit. So boo on the Bengals. The NFL needs to step up and actually do something about this, because now if you have Jamar Chase, half as good as what he once was for fantasy, right?
Mm-hmm.
T. Higgins can't even get on the damn field right now. Tyler Boyd, no thank you. Tight ends, who day, right? You see what I did there?
I did.
I think Joe Mixon's the only. Yeah, right. I think Joe Mixon's the only one that holds fantasy relevance here going forward. So, if you own a Bengals pass catcher, sorry, but this kind of, I would be shocked if it didn't spell the end of your season. So, it's really unfortunate that it went down like that. This was supposed to be one of the better Thursday night matchups that we've seen in the last couple of years, honestly, at least on paper. And it just didn't pan out that way because of the injury. Mark Andrews going down also, huge hit to fantasy, right? So now where you felt like you were set it and forget it tight end and you could live with Andrews, welcome to the streaming world like the rest of us. Hope you got yourself some Trey McBride, because he might be a player for that position that could propel you into the playoffs and win some leagues here. And you don't see that out of the tight end position a whole lot, but this dude's seeing 12, 13 targets a game. Like, that's insane. And so feed the beast, right? Kyler was obviously comfortable with him. Dobbs was comfortable with him before he left. Let's ride that out, man.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that comes to play, right? The Mark Andrews injury, like, they didn't even report it just season ending. It was he's out indefinitely. Like, that's when they're reporting injuries and it's an out indefinitely, like, that's always kind of the scary injury designation when you see those things reported. So, hopefully he gets well and has a speedy recovery there, because a lot of fun to watch. It was one of those that you were talking about. This Thursday night was one of the better games that we've had on paper, at least, coming through. Unfortunately, like the rest of the slate, right? And you and I were talking about this a little bit before we came on live. There's a lot of games that I was looking at and I was going through and really kind of doing the analysis on and all that it was just kind of like, yeah, like normally a lot of years, there's at least 3 or 4 games in every window that I'm like, ooh, I really want to see that one. I really want to see that one. Like that should be a great matchup. If nothing else, there's some compelling storylines in there that like, okay, want to see how this one pans out. There's like 3 games a week period now that I'm like, okay, I want to sit down and dedicate 4 hours to watch this thing, right? Like the Monday night game this week should be very exciting there. The Sunday night game really only I think holds a ton of a ton of watchability if you're a Denver fan or a Vikings fan, right? And your teams have kind of caught fire here the last few weeks,
I'm
and
surprised they didn't flex that one out.
so am I. But I think that the fact that the Broncos have won 3 straight, and I think the Vikings have won 4 or 5 straight, like they're 2 of the hottest teams as far as winning football right now in the league. So I could see why they might have left that one there, but you're right. Like that one doesn't have a lot of the star power, a lot of the name power. This isn't 2 teams that are, we're going to see, 1 and 2 seeds determined on that type of deal. These are 2 teams that are going to be fighting and have a pretty good uphill fight the rest of the way to make it into the playoffs. So, little surprised it didn't get flexed.
You wonder what could have been, right? I mean, no one can predict injuries.
Right.
But I cannot help but be cynical every time I'm watching an NFL game and I hear them talking about, well, it used to take us, weeks and months. And now, in the matter of, hours, our software system runs all these analytics and does 10,000 simulations to determine the best schedule possible. Like, this is the best schedule possible?
Right.
Now, no one could predict that we would have 6 starting quarterbacks on IR, right? Is that even Rodgers, Cousin, Watson, Burrow now, Anthony Richardson.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen changes in quarterback already in Las Vegas.
Right.
We've seen
Tennessee.
And that's changed. I mean, it has not been kind to
Very
us.
well might see one in New England here coming after the bye too.
Flipping back. Yeah, it's been flipping back and forth for the last 6 weeks now, right? Like, oh, I'm mad at Mac Jones. I'm pulling him again. Like, his confidence has to be shattered. Like, he is nothing but damaged goods. When this contract is up, if he even makes it to the end of it, I don't see anybody picking him back up. Like, there's just no way, right? Matt Stafford spent time down. Who else? Justin Fields spent time down. Like, it has been bad, like bad. So
right,
it's just not been pretty. I mean, we've seen running backs go down galore, right? Eckler missed a lot of time, Saquon missed time, Chubb's on IR, Achane went down after he had a great 2-game run, right? Jonathan Taylor's missed the first part of the season and he's finally coming back on. Like, it's been ugly, absolutely ugly for injuries to fantasy relevant players this year. And we might have said the same thing last year, right? Like, but I just don't remember this star power.
No, it's been a long time
injured
since
quite like this, right? You miss guys in the trenches, and that quietly creates ugly football because they're the unsung heroes of good football, right? The offensive and defensive line. But to have this much star power, Jefferson being on IR, right? Like, I mean, it just has not been good. Debo's been in and out, and we are not big Debo fans, but he is fantasy relevant at times, right? And he does have a name attached that pulls some weight. It's been a real bummer of an ugly, high profile name season. So in fantasy, it's the war of attrition, right? Survive and advance. That's why we say work the waiver wire. You're keeping an eye out for trades and this type of thing. But holy smokes, man, when you have this many players who have not hit across the board, yes, it affects all teams, but the NFL cannot be happy about all this and the fact that scoring's down across the league. It's just it's created quite a subpar product to watch in a lot of different areas, especially if you're just there for the offense and the fun.
Right. Okay, I have a question for you. So a little trivia type of thing here. And so you just mentioned all of these quarterbacks having gone down, having all of these changes, all of that. Do you know what the number is, the actual number of quarterbacks that have scored fantasy points for this season through 11 weeks?
Okay. Are we counting like Taysom Hill because he has the dual? I don't want to get caught on a typo.
Let me see if Taysom Hill's in this.
I'd tell you that
There's no
there's no
Taysom
Taysom
Hill in this data that I've got.
I want to tell you 48 or
You are too
49
low.
different quarterbacks.
Too
It's
low.
over 50, huh?
57 different quarterbacks have scored fantasy points for this season.
That is absolutely disgusting. And it does make sense. The Vikings have run through 3. The Patriots have run through 3. The Browns have run through 3.
Right.
Ugh.
Now, in seasons past, right, on the same qualification, we've seen more, right? But you've seen more because those are full seasons, and you start getting into that week 16, 17, 18 type of deal for these teams that are fully out of the playoffs and a guy that otherwise they wouldn't see the field, or you start letting some of those guys actually get some game reps.
How many times did Blaine Gabbert touch the field, right? Because the starting
Right.
quarterback had blown the other team out of the water, so he gets the last 3 series of the game.
Right. So there's a whole lot of that kind of going on, right? Daniel Jones, that was another name that I don't think we touched on there. Desmond Ritter to Tyler Heineke to whatever this looks like coming out for their bye again.
You had Hoyer, right? You had the Hoyer experience in Vegas too. So Vegas has played 3 different quarterbacks.
Right.
The Saints have technically played 3.
Right. Mike White.
I should have
gotten
thought
into
about
Miami.
that for half a second.
There's an absolute ton of these things just kind of going on. And it really, really kind of undermines and it changes the entire landscape of that. So, and it's kind of weird too when you think about it from the way the rules are all set up to protect the quarterbacks and all of this and all that. It seems like we see them going down at a higher rate than we have in years past as well. So, very interesting.
Yeah.
But
so my follow-up question to that is,
yep,
you have your big 3 in Mahomes and Allen and Hurts.
Okay.
And everybody had the big 3 going into the season.
Mm-hmm.
Does this push them even further up your draft board in the feeling that at least I'm going to get 15, 16 games out of them? Like they might miss one. That's always a potential, right?
Right.
They're nicked up here. They're, Allen and an elbow and the weird kneecap thing with Mahomes a couple years back, the hurts in his knee, right? And last year he went down too, like late season. So it's not that they're invincible and cannot get injured, but does it push them further up your board for next year now, knowing that, man, all these guys are getting hurt? Like, I want to get the most bang for my buck, and these guys at the moment have shown the longevity to be able to do it.
It depends on your format, right? Like if you're in a single QB league, I view the quarterback very much in the same vein a lot of times as tight ends, where it's okay to get in streaming quarterback mode and you're playing matchups, all of that kind of stuff. In a super flex, absolutely. Like you've got to take your quarterback early, kind of get that locked up, secured up, all that kind of stuff. Because if you don't, right, like you start coming into it to the point where if you're having to play, a couple of tier 3 quarterbacks or, tier 3, tier 4, tier 5 type of QBs in there for your super flex, it's an unwinnable situation. Like you might win some weeks here and there, but you're not going to be able to sustain long-term season-long success doing that. And in the super flex, there's not the waiver wire that you can run to pick up a quarterback to stream, all that kind of stuff. Like no, like there's only so much of that you can deal with. So yes, in that situation, it does kind of push that up. Although, Mahomes having a very disappointing season this year, especially when you put the names Mahomes on his statistics, right? Like it's QB8 coming into week 11 here, with seven quarterbacks, guys that were way down the draft board that have been up better. Josh Dobbs having a better season so far, for fantasy anyway. Sam Howell having an outstanding season. Both of those guys you could have gotten darn near free in your draft boards. But again, like that's dart throws, and you're getting lucky when you start getting some of those things. So
No, absolutely. Absolutely. So,
anyway, I do see that we've got a ton of questions in the chat here. Should we hit some of those up before we start getting into these game slates?
yep, let's hit them up.
All righty. So COD Reaper had to drop Noah Brown, picked up OBJ. Big mistake on my end, but he did end up putting up 15.6 last night, so not too worried.
When your guy goes down like that, I mean, I know we were talking about on the Tuesday show, right? And then they said Brown was going to be out. So when your guy goes down like that and you have to pivot, that's a great scenario, right? 100 yards, there's nothing wrong with that output. And there's no guarantee that Brown would have done that. We think he would have been close, right? But for what OBJ gave you, that's a great feeling after Thursday night game.
Absolutely. So Ajiji over on the YouTube, what do you guys think about Kyler over Herbert? Even though I have Keenan, feel like Keenan will get his in PPR, but he could see Eckler having a big game against Green Bay, limiting Herbert's ceiling.
Yeah, I think that's a really rational thought, right? And I would absolutely subscribe to that, right? We expect that there's going to be more point, at least I expect. And I think Derek, you do too, based off of, kind of going through the show doc before the game. Like we expect the Cardinals Texans game to be a much more high scoring affair than the Chargers Packers game. And I believe you're right on where Eckler should see a big game on the ground. Like his game may not even come from catching passes, but again, on the ground, because that's where Green Bay's limited, right? They struggle against the run, but against these corners, they're a lot tougher. So yes, Keenan might get his, but there's no guarantee that anyone else does in this game. So I think, yeah, you go ahead and play Kyler. I like the ceiling on that a bit more than what the Chargers, I think, are going to be able to offer on the road in November in Lambeau.
Right. And yeah, so when you look at it, right, like Herbert might edge Kyler out in total points there, but it's going to be because he gets 2 touchdowns through the air type of thing, right? Like this is one of those that when I think it's all said and done, I think both of these guys are 250, 260 through the air. Maybe Herbert sneaks out there just a couple more yards. Okay, cool. Kyler will get you some better rushing upside for sure on that one. And there's no reason to think that, especially from what we saw Kyler do, like we could very well get some vintage Kyler. If they get in the 5, they get inside the 5, he's liable just to take off and run it in for the touchdown himself on that one. So I think that they've got some deal there. Now, as far as the rankings go, I've got these guys kind of back to back, and you could coin based on the rankings and how I see them kind of projected out there, you could coin flip it. So I say all of that to say when I get to a coin flip deal and I'm looking at a deal on who I would put in, who I wouldn't, I start looking up the matchup to see who has the easier path to points there. Justin Herbert playing the Green Bay Packers. The Packers have given up the 6th fewest points to opposing quarterbacks this season. Kyler and the Arizona Cardinals taking on the Houston Texans here. The Texans have allowed the 6th most points to opposing fantasy quarterbacks. So it is a way plus game script and matchup for Kyler. So yeah, I would lean in there, and if I had the same roster decision to make as Gigi, I would do that as well and lean the Kyler route. Anyway, Furman Joust on YouTube saying great show. We appreciate that. Thank you very much. COD Reaper saying that his matchup for week 11, Purdy, Murray, Henderson, Amari Cooper, Jordan Addison, Dalton Schultz, Jerry Jeudy. Bench is T. Higgins, Taylor, Devonta Smith, London, bye with Watson, Levis, Justin Jefferson. Thoughts?
I'm putting Devonta Smith in over Jeudy. I just want a piece, right? If you have a piece of that Monday night game, go ahead and get it. And I think for how this is shaken out, I think Judy's the odd man out. I do think Cooper will still see. I think Cooper will still see at least 8 targets for Cleveland. They may not be pretty targets with DTR, but I do think he at least sees the targets. So there's opportunity there. Reports are Jefferson's not going to go, so I like the Addison play. And then Judy. I mean, Judy's upside lately has been like 50 yards.
Right.
Devonta Smith's upside is, 120 yards. I'm not saying he's going to get that, but that's the upside. Judy's not going to have a 100-yard game. Like we're just not going to see that. It's not how the Broncos are playing football. It's not how Russell Wilson's going through his progressions. It's not playing out that way. And there's no guarantee that Devonta Smith busts out and has a great game. But
I like the shot better.
Yeah, I like the shot better, and I like having something to root for Monday night. So I would swap Judy for Smith.
Right. And the Amari Cooper one, right? An interesting side note, right? Like this is one of those things that when you start looking at some things and all of that on things to, guys are very well aware of what statistics and what records and all that kind of stuff out there is. The Browns have only had 4 receivers throughout their entire organizational history. That's 4 receivers that have gotten to 800 yards in the first 10 weeks or 10 games of the season. Amari Cooper's at 715 yards. Like they're going to do what they can to try and get him 85 yards plus in this game. Whether it happens or not, different deal, but you can almost guarantee that he knows that, the coaching staff knows that, and they will try and game plan that accordingly to get him to that kind of record and milestone for the organization. So I do like, when you've got those kind of little tidbit things to look at and go, because these guys are human and records mean a lot to them too. So I could see him having a very good game, and I got a prop for that one later. All righty. Terry asking Puka versus Seattle or Dell versus Arizona. Terry, you always show up and you ask the tough ones, man. I love it though. Who do you got?
I'm gonna go Puka.
Yeah. I mean, they're close. Tank Dell has the better matchup going up against Arizona. CJ Stroud is doing CJ Stroud type of things. However, we've seen what happens with Puka Nacua when Matthew Stafford is under center. And Matthew Stafford is supposed to be a complete go this week. And when we've seen Matthew Stafford under center, Puka Nacua has yet to have less than 7 targets. So I like the fact that we can probably get a very, very good floor and a probably pretty good ceiling, because Seattle also tends to give things up there a little bit to the Rams. Whereas, Tank Dell, most of the times, if Nico Collins is truly back and Noah Brown is back, Tank Dell's upside is limited there a little bit. So wouldn't surprise me to see Tank Dell have more of a 5 or 6 target type of ceiling on this one. So Puka would be my answer as well. Terry asking, Purdy or Hal rate this trade? I traded away DJ Moore and Deontay Johnson for Adams and Stevenson.
I like the trade.
I do too.
I like the trade. There's nothing wrong with getting Adams and Stevenson. So I like that. Gives you a little bit of running back depth. Gives you the best. I mean, Devontae Adams still the best player in that trade, right? And you got that and a piece. I think you did well for yourself. So Purdy or Hal. I'm going to tell you Purdy.
I mean, they're close.
I'm going to pivot. I'm going to say Sam Howell by a touch, just because it's the Giants, right? Like you just have to pick on the Giants until they show otherwise. And right now, that is just kind of the easy direction to go. Sam Howell's been doing a good job getting it out, even in positive game script. They've been doing some check down things. It's not necessarily running straight forward. Gibson is out. So Brian Robinson, they're going to have to find ways to get him some breaks, right? He's going to need some breathers. So they're not going to be able to just focus in on him. And honestly, the Giants have been way better against the run than the pass anyway. So yeah, I'm going to pivot. I'm going to say Sam Howell.
I'm going to go with Hal as well, and it has everything to do with that matchup. Right, just like you said, pick on the Giants until they figure out how to stop it. And this is very well one of those that you got to start wondering what they've got left to fight for in that deal, right? Like that's a team in disarray at this point is what it looks like on the outside looking in. Chandler asking, my QB was Burrow, and he has some offers. Let me know if you like any Connor for Hal or Purdy, Kyler for Amari or Connor, or Mike Evans for Josh Allen. Thoughts, 6 points, passing touchdowns.
I'm going Mike Evans for Josh Allen. And here's Josh Allen is, yes, the best quarterback in the bunch, but after these next few weeks for Mike Evans are going to be really difficult. At Indianapolis, home against Carolina, at Atlanta, at Green Bay, home Jacksonville, home New Orleans, right? That's gets you through the rest of the season, fantasy playoffs. All those teams are in the top 13 in pass defense. Every single one of them. So Mike Evans is coming up on a grueling stretch. So if you can unload him now and get Josh Allen, that is the absolute play.
Bingo. Yep. QB non-running back, ETN, Pollard, Kyron, Connor. Wide receiver is Keenan, Mike, Debo, Amari, Ridley, tight end, Kittle. So basically given the roster for the
rest
previous
of it.
question.
Yeah. So you'll be able to run ETN, Connor, and Kyron, honestly, until Pollard shows that he's going to be a focal point of that Dallas offense. He's the odd man out in your running back room. You got Keenan Allen to anchor it, and then we're going to see how things shake out with Amari Cooper and the Browns. So like that. Yeah, and then Debo. So yeah, you can absolutely run 3 running backs and be okay. So you're only needing to worry about 2 wide receivers. You have Keenan Allen. So if your weakest spot on your entire roster is your running back 2, and that's Amari Cooper or Debo Samuel on any given week, I think you're doing okay.
Yeah, I would concur. TH over on the YouTube, should you trade Ramondre and Lockett for Kyron half-point PPR? I wouldn't. Like, I get the allure. Kyron looked really good, all of that. Like, I get the allure for trying to do that. However, you got a guy that's missed a whole lot of time here. This is one of those two that Ramondre has come on very strong lately and has one of the better running back schedules down the stretch here. So I probably wouldn't go that route. Any other thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm chewing on it here a little bit. Yeah, I think it's just a touch of an overpay. And not a lot. Like I don't think it's a lot. And I think a lot of realms that it is okay, but we haven't seen Kyron Williams in 5 weeks. It'll be because they had their bye in the middle of all this too. So it'll be 5 weeks since we've seen Kyron Williams on an ankle. Yes, we expect him to be back, but does he need to get back into game shape? Does D'Angelo Henderson, does that continue to eat in? So he's not going to be kind of the sole provider in the running back room like he was pre-injury. Like there's a lot of unknowns to gamble on what Kyron Williams did the first 6 weeks of the season. And I think for that reason, and knowing what Ramondre has left, I think it's just a touch too much, and I would pass on that offer.
Right. So, I mean, it's one of those two that realistically, if you were just looking rest of the season, right? Kyron comes back this week, healthy rest of season. I don't know that I even have Kyron over Ramadre rest of season. Like it's gonna be close, but I think they're both RB2s rest of season. And Kyron's probably right there at 24, Ramadre probably 20, 21, somewhere in that realm. Any other thoughts there?
No, I think that's about.
Okay.
I think that's about. Right.
All righty. We got Ajiji asking or saying, thanks, guys. So what's the deal with Goddard? You think he's going to IR or the Eagles going to play week to week? Because I stashed him for playoffs, potentially thinking I could IR him.
Goddard wasn't really getting in the end zone anyway.
Right.
Right. I mean, he's part of a high profile offense, so I get it's an asset that you don't necessarily want to give up. But he is not nearly as efficient as he was last year. They're not targeting him as much with AJ Brown just kind of taking over Jalen Hurts targets. And then obviously they're still trying to feed in a couple of the running backs and Devonta Smith. It's not that Goddard's the odd man out, but they're just not focused on the tight end. That's not where this offense is running through. So I think he's going on the IR personally, but obviously we'll see. They have until Monday to kind of let everybody know what they're going to do, a little peek behind the curtain. But I think he holds more name power than fantasy power here at the moment.
Definitely more name power than fantasy power, right? Because this is a guy that's in half point PPR is averaging 8 points a game when he plays, right? Like you can easily kind of pivot and find guys off the waiver wire to roll that. And that includes some big blow up games. That also includes a whole lot of games where he flat out just wasn't even usable for fantasy. Because I mean, realistically, outside of week 5 and week 7, he hasn't been usable for your rosters, right? Like if you were playing him week in, week out on any of those weeks other than 5 and 7, he was a loser. Like he would have lost you the position at tight end, right? Unless your guy was playing the tight end like 30 that week, because it's been that up and down. So if he doesn't fall into the end zone, he's not going to get you points for fantasy.
Yeah, through 9 weeks, really 10 weeks if you want to count their bye. He had 2 weeks at tight end 1 and 7 weeks at tight end 2 or 3.
Right.
Really, it was 5 at tight end 2 and then 2 at tight end 3 or worse. So right. He's had just as many tight end 3 performances as tight end 1 performances.
Right. And realistically, if you're playing in a league where it's a start 1 tight end, if you don't have a top 12 tight end on that one, you lost the position that week.
Yeah. And his stretch is brutal. Kansas City, Buffalo, San Francisco, Dallas, Seattle, the Giants, Arizona, who's been much better. It'll get you through the rest of the season. Like his schedule is not tight end friendly, and he's been kind of ho-hum 4-5 targets. Kind of, I think he's averaging 5.5 targets a game.
Yeah, it's been rough to say the least for Dallas.
Yeah, for a guy that we thought he was going to finish tight end 8, tight end 9, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's just he's not there. He has not been able to get that done. So,
but it just speaks to how bad the tight end position is this year. That it's so kind of spread out from the standpoint that even going through his bye in 10 weeks, he's still tight end 10 at this point, right? Obviously, that'll change coming in here because he's not going to be putting up points. Other guys will. There's a lot of guys kind of right in there, but yeah, tight end 10 and really is only giving you 2 usable weeks. So that's one of those that you got to kind of take it as the, not just take it as the aggregate, but take a look at the fine details on that one to figure that out. So, all righty, guys. So if you have any other questions, let's throw them in the chat. Let's get those rocking. Let's get those rolling. But you ready to hit up some games of this week?
Yeah, let's see what we got coming to us.
Alrighty. So the graphics guy had to fire him over the weekend. We he just didn't get it done. So we'll hopefully have some of those for you next week. But anyway, little inside joke there. But
That's all good.
alrighty. So we've got the Pittsburgh Steelers taking on the Cleveland Browns. The Browns favored by 1.5 points. The over under on this one, 32.5. Thoughts on this game?
I'm gonna take the Browns in an under ugly matchup. This one's not going to be pretty. So I'm glad that a lot of markets, this one's just going to get kind of buried, but nevertheless, here we are with it. So I'm going to take Cleveland to cover. I think they can win this game by 2. And I am going to take the under as well in a low scoring affair.
Fair enough. I was really thinking that I was going to, like, I really, really thought I wanted to take Pittsburgh in this one. They are 6-1 against the spread on the road recently. So really wanted to kind of go that route. And then I remembered that Cleveland's defense is really good, really legit. Kenny Pickett has been, well, not good. That'd be the nice way to say that. Not good when it comes to fantasy, when it comes to,
It's because Matt Canada is his offensive coordinator.
Well, that has a lot to
There's
do
some
with
other things on top of it, but that is a big deal. I cannot believe Pittsburgh's just still fumbling around with him.
Well, Ken Dorsey's looking for a job. So
I'd take him over Matt Canada in a heartbeat.
So the anyway, it's one of those that if Pittsburgh was going to keep this thing close, it's going to come down to TJ Warren and Najee Harris to really try and get this done on the ground. And Cleveland's just been really good against the run. So I do think that we do find Cleveland finding a way to win this thing at home in the under. This is going to be is it going to surprise you when you look up and you see this thing end in like 9-6 type of thing with a 5 field goals kick total? Like, I could absolutely see that being the total score on this thing. One of the props that I really liked, right? I mentioned that Amari Cooper needs 85 yards to become the 5th receiver in Browns franchise history to get to 800 yards through the first 10 games or through their first 10 games played. I think they find a way to do it. So I'm going to take his prop of over 42.5 receiving yards.
I'm going to take George Pickens over 2.5 receptions. I feel like as good as Cleveland's pass defense is, Pickens should be able to catch 3 or 4 balls.
Yeah, I could see that one happening. All righty, let's go ahead and that's funny. She said, "Is your graphics guy Ken Dorsey?"
Yes. This is why Josh Allen kept turning the ball over, because Ken Dorsey was doing our graphics.
Oh, anyway, he wasn't, just to clarify, but that's just funny. That's some good humor there on a Friday night. All right. Next matchup, we got the Bears, we got the Lions, and the Lions favored by 7.5. The over under 47.5. Thoughts on this one?
I like the Lions here at home. They've been a very good home team. The Bears have not been a very good team at all, whether it's been Bagent or Fields at quarterback. But nevertheless, we're supposed to be getting Justin Fields, so that's good, at least for some people's fantasy rosters. But bad week for it. Taking Detroit. I am going to take the under. I think 47.5 is just a touch too much in this game. It would not surprise me to see this game, 27-17, something like that.
Yep, I can agree with that and get down on that one. I do think that the under comes into play here as well. Not going to surprise me if you see Detroit have something like 40-45 rushing attempts in this game here, right? Chicago tends to give up some points on the ground, all that kind of good stuff. Detroit with a really good, offensive line. So I think that they just kind of, bulldoze their way through this game and run the ball with a very fast moving clock when this thing's all said and done. Chicago, though, I do think puts up some points, right? Like the Lions, while they've been good against the run this season, they have had a hard time containing mobile quarterbacks and quarterbacks that can run. So I do look for Justin Fields to get some good yardage on that one and keep this thing close, but I do think that we're going to see this thing end up just on the under. Detroit 5-0 against the spread against teams with losing records. So I do think that Detroit finds a way to win this thing by 8 points or more. One of the props I really like, Monty to go over 48.5 rushing yards.
Right on. And I'm going to take his counterpart. I'm going to take Jahmyr Gibbs over 9.5 carries. I think you're right, Derek. They're going to run the ball a ton in this game, and surely 10 or 11 of them are going to come Gibbs' way.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Alrighty, the Chargers, Green Bay. They're wow, words are tough tonight. Squaring off in Lambeau. Chargers favored by 3. The over under 43.5.
I'm going to take the Chargers in this game. The push honestly would not surprise me at all, but I am also taking the under. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of points. Green Bay does do a good job against the pass, so what the Chargers do is going to be more short game and ground game based, and for that reason, I believe it's going to be the under.
Yeah, fair enough. So I'm kind of right there with you, right? Like I do think that the Chargers find a way to win this one. The Packers are all of 1-5 against the spread in their last 6 games. So I don't see that there's a way that they keep this thing overly close, other than the fact that the Packers have been pretty good against the pass, pretty bad against the run though. So I think Austin Eckler does have a good game, and I do think that they get Eckler involved in the passing game here as well, and going over 3.5 receptions in this one.
Fair enough. I have Eckler going over 12.5 carries in this game. I think he sees 15.
Yeah, I think he just eats in this one. So best of luck to you if you're facing off against Austin Eckler in your fantasy matchups. All righty. Next matchup, we have the Raiders heading down to Miami, taking on the Dolphins. Dolphins favored by 13, the over under 46.5. Thoughts on this one?
Somehow the Raiders are 5-5, and through all the turmoil and inconsistent quarterback play and everything else, they are sitting as a 500 football team. Not after this week. I have Miami winning and winning convincingly. This game, it's a 13-point spread, like you said, Derek, but I think Miami finds a way to win this one by 2 touchdowns. And I'm going to take the over because I do think the Raiders will put up, I think the Raiders are able to put up, at least 17 points in this game. So Dolphins will take care of the rest though, and we'll get to 47 plus.
Yeah, I really, like, when I was looking at this thing, I really wanted to find a way to try and take the under, and I just had a tough time doing it because the last 10 times that these two teams have met up, you've seen the under come into play a vast majority of them. But I do think you're right. I don't think that there's a way that the Raiders are going to slow down the Dolphins enough. And I think that they're going to do just enough to keep pace with them to the point where we're going to see the Dolphins cover, and we're going to see the over come into play with this one here. The Raiders, up seemingly every time that they fire a coach mid-season, man, all of a sudden they seem to be a playoff type of team, a team that's on the rise and knocking on the door. Maybe that's the secret for the Raiders. Just hire a coach, fire mid-season, and away you go. You'll be a playoff contender every year. That's what the history has shown, recent history has shown anyway. I kid. All right. So one of the props I really like, Raheem Mostert to go under 56.5 rushing yards.
I'm taking Aiden O'Connell to go over 196.5 passing yards. I do think he can get to 200 in this game, mainly because they're going to be playing catch up.
Fair enough. And I'd think that Achane eats into the Mostert work here as well. So, all righty, let's go ahead and move on over to the Giants and the Commanders squaring off here. The Commanders favored by 8.5. The over under on this one, 37.5. Thoughts on this one?
I'm going to take the Giants to cover this game. At some point, they're going to have to kind of shake this a little bit. And I do think 8.5 is just a touch too much for the Commanders to cover. That defense giving away their pass rushers. you're going to see a little bit more time to throw the ball here if you're the Giants. And honestly, you have Saquon Barkley, so he just needs to be involved in just about everything you do. It would not surprise me to see him with 27 plus total touches inside this game. So I'm going to take the over in a little bit of a high scoring NFC East affair. I think these guys can get to 40. And I'm going to take the Giants to cover on the road.
Fair enough. I am with you on the points. I do think that we do see points put up here. Not going to surprise me, if the Commanders get close to touching 30 in this one. And so, if they're gonna put up that many points themselves, I think that we can get the Giants to see double-digit points there. So, I do think we see just on the over. However, the Giants are all of 2-7-1 against the spread on the season, and 1-5 against the spread on the road this year. So I am not liking the Giants to be able to keep pace on this one. I do think that the Commanders find a way to get to 9 points worth of a win here or more. And it's a tough one to say, but I do think that we can see this one end up probably 30-13, 30-10. One of the props I really like is Logan Thomas to go over 3.5 receptions.
Very good. I'm taking Saquon to be over 15.5 receiving yards.
Yeah, I can certainly see that one. All right, next matchup.
Feed him early, feed him often. I think it's the only way I'm going to get to that cover.
That very well could be. Dallas taking on the Panthers. Cowboys favored by 10.5. The over-under is 42.5. Thoughts on this one?
I'm going to take Dallas. I know a lot of people are calling this a trap game, and I think the Cowboys realize that, right? They fell to a trap game in week 2 against the Cardinals when they were dinged up along the offensive line, but they're starting to get healthy now. This defense has been playing better even without Diggs. They're finding ways to get it done, and I think this is another opportunity for the Cowboys to take that next step and really kind of get their rushing game going here against a Carolina team that sits back in a lot of zone and doesn't put a whole lot of pressure on the quarterback. They just don't want to get beat over the top.
Fair enough. Hopefully this is a game we can see Tony Pollard get going, because Carolina does like lots of running backs that put up yardage on him. However, I'm going to be right there with you on the over. I think that we get to probably 44, 45 points on this thing. I do think that this is probably one of those that we see Dallas 27, Carolina 17 type of thing. So the hook scared me off just enough that I'm going to take Carolina on this one. Road favorites that are favored by more than 7 this season. I think I've got that stat right. Anyway, road favorites that are favored by 7 points or more are 0-8-1 against the spread. And when it comes to even outright type of winning, they're only 4-5 outright. So teams favored by 7 or more as road favorites actually have a losing record outright on this one and have yet to cover a spread. So I'm going to take Carolina to cover that 10.5. Tony Pollard, though, I do see him going over 2.5 receptions.
Very good. I'm going to take Rico Dowdle over 22.5 rushing yards. He had a really good game last week against the Giants. Yes, a lot of that was in cleanup time, but I do think with McCarthy praising him, kind of unprompted praise for Mike McCarthy, I think we will see him with a couple more opportunities in this game, and we will see him get over this 22.5 mark.
Fair enough. I like it. All right, Tennessee.
No, you don't. You have Pollard in the home league. You don't want that.
You know what? If it means that he gets his and Pollard gets his, I'm all good with that. But let's have a Tony Pollard sighting, please, at some point this season. Like, that's what I want. Just a Tony Pollard sighting. Dallas, you franchise tag this guy. Let's utilize him. Welcome. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Anyway, let's move on here to the next matchup. We've got Tennessee and Jacksonville, Titans and the Jaguars facing off here. The Jaguars favored by 7, over under 39.5. Thoughts on this one?
I really struggle with this one because I like the 7, right? So if we would have jumped on this one, opened at 6, I would have felt a lot better taking Jacksonville. Now I'm kind of limping into it because I think the push is very much in play here. But nevertheless, I'm taking Jacksonville. I'm going to take the over. I think there's going to be a couple points in this game. I think we're able to see this game, 20, what is it, 21-13, something like that. I do think that we just get over the 40.
Yeah.
Except I can't do math, and 21-14 is not an over. That's an under. Sorry. Um, Regardless, I digress. I'm taking Jacksonville. Sorry, Derek. I'm taking Jacksonville. I'm taking the over. Jags are at home. They're licking their wounds a little bit off of kind of a butt kicking from San Francisco. So they're going to try and get right here and really reclaim dominance here in the AFC South and really try and hold off the Texans. Right? I mean, the Texans have been charging here lately, so they gotta keep winning games here to get back in the playoffs.
Yep. How about 24-17?
Yeah.
That's how I'm seeing this one play out. Is that 24-17 push like that? I'm right there with you. Like, this feels like a touchdown game, and that's kind of where I think that one comes down to. But since we can't call for the push, I'm going to call for Jacksonville to cover on this one, who has been playing lights out football, 4-1 since week 5 of the season here. They have won. They've really kind of come through with a bunch of really good games here, 4-1 against the spread this season when they are the favorites. So I do think that they find a way to get that job done. One of the props that I really like was Calvin Ridley to go under 50.5 receiving yards.
Fair enough. I'm taking Derrick Henry over 14.5 carries. If Tennessee is going to try and stay in this game, they're going to have to feed him the rock. And he's the best at what he does. And what he does isn't very pretty sometimes.
Right. All righty, let's hit up the next one here. We've got the Cardinals and the Texans. And Texans favored by 5.5. The over under 47.5. Thoughts on this one?
The hook got me on this one, as far as the game line. So I'm taking the under in this game. I think it's going to be 47. But I do have Arizona covering. So it is going to be a tightly contested affair. I think that the Cardinals have at least found a little bit of life, right, with Kyler, right? I think he brings a little bit of juice to this team, and they had been playing decent with Dobbs. No discredit to him at all, but Kyler's their guy, right? He's the one they paid all the money to. So they're glad to have their guy back. And in week 2, I think he's able to springboard off of a really good performance last week. So Arizona to cover, but I am taking the under.
Fair enough. Yeah, I kept kind of going back and forth on this one on the over, the under, because that line is set right there to the point where I could easily see a 47 or 48 point game on this one. I'm going to go with the over. I think there's just enough that happens in this one to the point where that we're going to see points put up in this one. So I do like Arizona, though, to keep it within the 5.5. I think this is about a field goal game when it's all said and done. One of the props that I really liked was Hollywood Brown to make an appearance in this one, right? A very quiet week last week, which surprised a lot of us, thinking that, Kyler and Hollywood, that connection was back and we would see Hollywood show out. Didn't happen last week. So I think they find a way to get him more involved and get that thing going earlier in this game. So I do see Hollywood Brown going over 55.5 receiving yards.
I have Trey McBride over 5.5 receptions. Kyler looked his way early and often last week, and I think he's going to do more of the same here. I just hope he falls into the end zone.
Absolutely. All righty, let's go ahead and head on to Tampa Bay, taking on the San Francisco 49ers. So Buccaneers and Niners squaring off here. Niners favored by 12, the over under 41.5. Thoughts on this one?
Picking San Francisco. I just don't think Tampa Bay is going to be able to keep up. The pass rush, I do think, is going to eat Baker Mayfield up here a little bit. And yes, Tampa Bay has been susceptible to the pass, but now they have two dynamic pass rushers. And ask Trevor Lawrence what he thought about them last week, because he was in an ice bath for a really long time after that game. And I think Baker's going to be seeing a lot of the same thing, especially with the Niners being at home. So I'm taking the Niners. I am taking the over. I think the Niners are going to put up some points in this game. So wouldn't be surprised if the Niners, touch 33 to 35 points, something like that. And I do think Tampa is going to be able to get a couple touchdowns. So it kind of easily gets to this over for me.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think that the Niners, after that 3-game skid before the bye, they kind of heard everybody out there talking and heard all of that kind of stuff. They've made some moves this season to bring in Chase Young, bolster up that pass rush even more so, make that pass rush even scarier. They got some of their guys back along the offensive side of the ball as well, right? You were talking earlier about the unsung heroes of that Trent Williams coming back. Definitely made a big difference here to the San Francisco Niners. So I do think that the Niners find a way to get to that 12. I do like the over. It really wouldn't surprise me if we see the Niners come close to touching 40 by themselves in this one. And I think Tampa Bay also does enough to put up some points here. But yeah, this one here is not going to surprise me to see a lot of points scored. I think CMC finds his way into the end zone after missing and losing that touchdown streak that he had going. But I think that he starts again this week with anytime touchdown.
Very good. I'm taking Rashad White over 43.5 rushing. He's consistently been around 50 to 55 yards. Yes, San Francisco is going to make it difficult, but Tampa Bay's done a really good job of staying balanced. So as long as they're not 30 points down, they're going to continue to run the ball intermittently, and White is by far the bell cow back there in Tampa. So I do think he gets over 43.5.
I like it. All right, let's go ahead and head out to New York, where the Jets are heading upstate to take on the Bills. And Buffalo favored by 7. The over-under is 39.5. Thoughts on this one?
Typically, when you fire a coach, the team goes one of two ways. Either they galvanize together or they fall apart. I don't think Josh Allen's going to let this team fall apart. They've not been good against the spread this year. They've been rather disappointing against really lesser competition. But I do think that they will get right. I think that was a wake-up call this past Monday night against the Broncos. I think that they probably had a really tough week of practice, and they know that they need to go. They need to go on a run here, right? Whether it's to catch Miami, whether it's to fight for a wild card spot with how the NFC North has been going with all the teams. I guess sans the Bengals now really kind of hitting their stride. So it's a tough road to hoe. Their playoff chances are rather slim here at the moment, but I think they send a message in a big way and come out and handle the Jets.
Fair enough. I do think that the Jets find a way to keep this thing tight, right? That New York defense has been pretty good. The Bills are struggling, and you're right. Like, firing a coach typically goes one of two ways. I don't know that getting rid of the offensive coordinator is the answer, right? Like, anyway, say all that to say that I'm going to take the Jets. I'm going to take the over on this thing. I think we see both teams end up with 20 plus points in this one. Well, we'll probably see it somewhere in the neighborhood of the, Buffalo 24 and the Jets 17. So just on the over side of it, one of the props I really like is Breece Hall to go over 54.5 rushing yards.
I like that. About took it. I did go with Dalton Kincaid over 4.5 receptions, though. He has clearly become the number 2 target for Josh Allen in this offense. So I like Kincaid to continue to be fed.
I like that one too. All right, let's go ahead and hit up Seattle and the LA Rams. Seattle favored by 1, over under 46.5. Thoughts on this one?
Taking Seattle in this game. And honestly, I don't know why. But I did take Seattle. The game line called it, right? They're damn near pick 'em, a slight road favorite. It is it's not going to be I think this game has the fantasy star power to be dynamic, but I think once it's actually played out on the field, I think it's not going to quite live up to the hype. So Seattle wins the game, but I do have the under. I think that we're going to see kind of a really slow playing first half, and any points that are really scored is going to have to come later in the game.
Fair enough. I do think that you and I are on some different pages there on this one, because I've got the Rams on this one, right? I just took the other side of that pick 'em. So I do think that the Rams find a way to get it done. They have had Seattle's number, or have at least covered the last handful of meetings that these two teams have squared off against. So I do think that we find a way for the Rams to get in there, cover, win this one. I do think that the over comes into play, right? 46.5. This is one of those that I think we're going to see both teams end up putting up some points on this thing here. Not going to surprise me when we look up and we see this thing end up somewhere in the neighborhood of 24 to 24, 23 even. Like, this is going to be a very tightly contested matchup, and I think that it comes down to somebody misses an extra point type of thing. But we are going to see some points put up in this one. One of the props I really like was Puka Nacua to go over 5.5 receptions. Like I stated earlier, Matthew Stafford is expected to play in this one. In games that Matthew Stafford, Puka Nacua is playing, Puka has yet to see less than 7 targets. Typically, he tends to trend closer to that double digits, and I think he can come down with more than half of those. So I'm thinking he goes over that 5.5 receptions.
Very good. I have Cooper Kupp under 81.5 receiving yards. Would not surprise me to 75 to 80 kind of mark. But the 81.5, I do think Seattle has seen him enough that they'll be able to kind of scheme some things in to make life more challenging for Cooper Kupp.
Fair enough. Sunday night game. We've got the Vikings and the Broncos. Broncos favored by 2.5. Over under on this one, 42.5.
I'm doing this for my fandom because I think I picked every Denver game wrong except last week. I'm taking Minnesota. I'm hoping the Broncos win, but I'm taking Minnesota. I'm going to take the over, though. I think there's going to be some points scored in this game. Yes, the Broncos defense has been playing better, but realistically, I do think both sides can get to 20, right? So 20-21, 23-21, 23-20. It's going to be, I think it's somewhere in that neighborhood. And I think Minnesota comes out on the heads up end here.
Fair enough. So I'm going to take Denver, right? They're right. And both teams are riding a heater on this one, right? Like, both teams playing real red hot, both teams finding a way to win games here coming down the stretch. I think Denver's got something going on this one. That defense has certainly stepped up quite a bit. The offense getting things done here as well. I do think that there's a bunch of points that are put up here on this one, because I do think that we probably see this one end up in the 24-21 side of things here. And so we see the over come into play. I do like Denver ending up on that plus side of that field goal there. So I'm going to call for Denver. One of the props I really like was Javonte Williams to go over 2.5 receptions.
I have Cortland Sutton under 53.5 receiving yards. He has just not been able to crack over that number here for a while. Even with a 30-yard catch last week and everything, like, he was still under this total. So it's going to be tough the way that the Broncos call their offensive plays. Maybe you see Jerry Jeudy, get closer to that 48, 47 type mark, kind of eat into it. Javonte's been playing really well. So if the Broncos get a lead early, I expect them to lean heavily on the run game between Javonte and McLaughlin. So all that spells towards an under receiving yards total for Mr. Sutton.
Fair enough. All righty. One of the Monday night game, last game we got here. We've got the Eagles Chiefs squaring off in the SB rematch here. Chiefs favored by 2.5, over under 45.5. Thoughts on this one?
I'm gonna take Philly. in this game. They've been playing a bit better football than Kansas City has. Um, yeah, Kansas City has just been meh offensively, and their defense has really come to play, right? But the Eagles have already had a couple high profile matchups with Miami and Dallas, and they've been able to come out on the winning end of both of those. Kansas City really hasn't had a marquee matchup yet this year, if you think about it. The Miami game, but it was in Germany, um, and kind of a snooze fest, if you will, that 21-14 game here a couple weeks back. So I think Philly brings it. Coming off a bye week, had plenty of time to prepare. I know Kansas City was coming off a bye week as well. So a little interesting as both teams had a full week to game plan for one another. But I think part of that's what the NFL wanted, right? They wanted their uh, two best teams, arguably, to have the extra time to create a really good matchup. So I think we get there with Philly, and I think we get the over. A lot of points in this game. So it opened at 48.5. It's down to 45. I think the open was closer to the game total than where it's sitting right now.
Yeah, I think both teams find a way to get north of 25. So not going to surprise me to see this one be a 50-point plus type of matchup. So I'm right there with you on the over. One of the things though that I've learned is just don't go against Coach Reed off of a bye, right? He's 21-3 outright, coming off of a bye over the course of his career, and I'm going to ride that as well. So I do think that Kansas City finds a way to win this by 3. Even though I think the Eagles will be very motivated to go out there in this rematch type of deal. But one of the props I really like, DeAndre Swift to go over 58.5 rushing yards. That is one of the ways that you beat the Chiefs is you keep the offense off of the field, and with their defense playing to the level that it has, you're going to have to try and keep them on the field longer. So I think we're going to see Philadelphia try and run the ball and establish the run early and often in this one.
Fair enough. I took a similar approach to keeping Philly off the field. You throw the ball. I mean, they just do not do well against the pass. So I'm taking Sky Moore over 1.5 receptions. I might actually have to sweat this out. Like this might be a late fourth quarter sweat where Sky gets his second catch, but I do think he's able to get at least 2.
Yeah, it's not like the that Gus Edwards call from the Tuesday show for last night where the 0.5 receptions came true very early.
Exactly.
So, alrighty. Well, guys, that's all the slates of games that we've got. So if you've got questions, anything like that for your fantasy rosters, let's get those things out here. Let's talk about them. Because we'll start kind of wrapping up here, but we'll stick around to answer any questions that you've got for sure. So, but any kind of final thoughts out there?
No, we are hitting trade deadlines. We are hitting kind of the final push, right? There's only a couple weeks left before the fantasy playoffs start. So, hopefully everybody's team or teams are in contention. I have a couple, as I realize I'm like having to yell into that for y'all to hear me. I have a couple that just didn't make the cut, whether it was injuries, bad roster moves, or just, lack of talent in a rebuilding roster. I had a couple that haven't quite made the cut, but I'm definitely plus in competitive or locked in here for playoffs. So I'm looking forward to the next couple weeks here and rounding out the end of our regular season as it is.
Absolutely. Everybody's kind of in that third quarter, right? Where you got to look at the fantasy season as those quarter type of deals. And you got to make sure that you're in contention to play the fourth quarter, right? Like this is coming down. If you've got to manufacture some wins, you got to go out there and manufacture wins to make sure that you get to play in the fourth quarter here, right? Obviously the fourth quarter being the playoffs here. But so best of luck to everybody out there. I'm not seeing any questions coming in. So I think we're going to call it a night. If you have any questions between now and kickoff, make sure that you hit us up on the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok at Good Old Boys FF. Head over to the YouTube channel, click that subscribe button. One of the best ways to support this independent podcast. That's going to do it for us. He's Kevin. I'm Derek. Have a good one. Be safe. Toodaloo.